Greetings, friends. Operational situation by the end of the 8th of May. We will analyze in more detail the Kupiansk-Svitovsky section of the front. Of course, we will talk for the Kharkiv direction. There is a lot of news, and we will analyze the situation in more detail on the Pokrovsky and Veliko-Novoselovsky directions. We'll start with you. The Svitovsky section continues active hostilities, both in the area of Kislovka, and attempts continue from the Russian side to further improve the tactical situation in the direction of Stalmakovka. Fresh footage was published, where Russian troops were moving along the forest belt in a southwesterly direction, and actually reached about the center of the gray zone. Subsequently, they retreated to their original positions, to the intersection support, so we do not record any changes. But taking into account where the previous attacks were, we still have a number of positions to clarify, from Koloma of the Czech Republic to Strimakovka, then south of Novoselovsky, and from Krivoshivka, now in the direction of Strelmakovka. We can confidently say that the enemy will continue to make attempts because there are Titan forces, that is, they have Titan reserves which they are now using. So far, these are small assault groups, perhaps everything is limited to this, but in any case, they will continue to probe the defense of the armed forces of Ukraine in this sector of the front, because, based on the vector of attacks that we have today for the 8th of May, it means that they are undertaking what they have in mind. It means that part of the forest belt should be taken under control in parallel with Stilmakovka. For this purpose, assault actions were carried out from Kolomichika, and, accordingly, active hostilities are also continuing from Krivoshivka. So far they are positional in nature, and I repeat, these are small assault groups, but in general, part of the forest belt is one of the plans that they are trying to implement now. Therefore, active hostilities continue without significant changes, except that there are still 2 points that we have in the gray zone for clarification. We proceed further, Lymanskaya, Severskaya, and Chasyarsky directions without any changes. The Pokrov direction, active hostilities continue in our country, as in the area of Novoalexandrovka, where Russian troops are now trying to improve the situation on Novoalexandrovka itself. And here, accordingly, what we have been talking about, attempts have already been made to advance to the settlement itself, that is, along the 3 forest belts, as we have talked about before, in the western direction, so there are active hostilities in this area. We are not fixing any changes today, everything is still within the red and gray zone, but today I want to note one more point. There is an interesting one. Before, Russian military officers, as you remember, drew a lot of things that did not exist. We spoke for Ribber, and that means a number of settlements that they did not control. Nevelskaya also worked, noting the progress, yes, but there was no progress, and, in fact, there was no capture of settlements. And today, on the contrary, they are not noticing. They have drawn the Novokalinovka ceramics somewhere only today. The last summary of it. Even where there is already a clear geolinking, and Russian troops have installed flags, they do not draw it in red. Very strange. Most likely, this is just the same element of information warfare. Because you asked me to comment on how it turns out that there is on our side. Well, on our side it has already been recorded that the enemy is there, they do not note it all. The fact is that they are trying, realizing that the APU has not yet been received in all sectors of the front. Some brigades have started to receive ammunition. Parity will naturally be achieved, so to speak. They are trying to stretch the victory relations as much as possible, that is, they will submit what happened with some delay, 2, 3, 5 days, respectively, a week, because they need to maintain high morale, and so on. And accordingly, this is part of the information war, so it's not surprising. Sometimes it happens, yes, when they draw something that is not there and vice versa, do not keep up with what is already there. So we go further. The Falcon. There were attempts to advance along the railway, and actually now active hostilities are continuing north of the village of Sokol, just where the support is located. The enemy conducted, and continues to conduct assault operations, trying to do what? Move, of course, to the support. It is very important for him, because it will allow him to transfer additional forces, and, accordingly, to secure, so to speak, the flank to secure, in order to increase pressure on the new Alexanders, which we just talked about, and, accordingly, due to numerical superiority, then try to push the direction of the support in the south direction, and further west also in the direction of another one. In general, the pressure on the Falcon should be increased from two directions, respectively from Soloviev and from the position near the railway. So far, we have not noticed any changes because we are recording active hostilities within the red and gray zones. As for Soloviev-Novopokrovskaya, Berdik-Novopokrovskaya, active hostilities continue. The enemy also conducts active assaults here, continues to conduct them. Mainly this is Novopokrovskoye and the direction of the field reservoir without significant changes. Now we have all the fighting within the gray zone, because taking into account the way the defense was built on the part of the AFU, and the Russian troops failed to break through it. Soloviev, as you remember, was then thrown back in the direction of the Falcon, and attempts were made along the forest belt, which runs south of Stavka. There were also several attempts with the support of armored vehicles, but they also managed to stop. So now they have switched to the tactics of small assault groups, and accordingly they are trying to move as absent-mindedly as possible along this section. Therefore, active military operations continue within the gray zone. Moving on. Then we have the Kurikov direction, Krasnogorskovka. Two changes, and yet the vector was correct, which I was talking about. Now we will be more detailed. So, when the attack was a fraction of the geological, I then told you that it would most likely be an attempt to strike in a northerly direction, and then I said they were pushing east. But then we were talking not from the north of the river, but to the south. Everything that is located in the direction of the central street, that is, to break through approximately to this areas. For what? In order to cut off the area of maximum development, that is, where they may have great difficulties, by moving west and north of it. Well, actually, due to the river, there will be a conditional border. Yes, we have one of the streets. And then they move in a westerly direction, increasing pressure, including on the Krasnogorsk refractory plant. Well, in general, to surround this area, and not to conduct military operations. Then they occupied the hunting yard. As you remember, I said then that there are a lot of labyrinths where to advance. Unfortunately, he took over the opponents, and accordingly continued the assault operations. We said then that there is a vector for the area that we have east, the eastern district, and, accordingly, for the northern part. There are also attempts, and at the same time, they tried to move north from the hunting yard, the hunting house, where there are also two supports, to take them under control. But today we state that they managed to move along just the same two streets in the eastern district in a westerly direction. And at the same time, information was received, but it was already more relevant during the day. We did not have a daytime one. My microphone was out of order, as you remember. So they managed to take some more part in the south, including along Zheleznodorozhnaya Street. Therefore, the situation by the end of the day looks like this. The enemy has advanced to a depth of up to 700 meters. This is exactly the same eastern area. And active fighting continues for the Krasnogorovsky refractory plant. Naturally, there is fierce fighting going on there, and at this moment the enemy increases the pressure. We have already said with you that they have transferred forces from Donetsk. They will be gradually pulled up, and accordingly we see it now. Well, in principle, they concentrated in the southern part, so they will increase pressure on Krasnogorovka itself. For them it is very, very important. Well, because first of all it is a fortified city, and the topographic component plays an important role in terms of building a defense line, where you can transfer the site completely into a blind defense. I mean, if they manage to capture Krasnogorskovka, yes. As Vadim Skibitsky said, in a few hours, yes, it's a matter of time. Well, such words were very loud. And unfortunately, so far we are not saying that it will be possible to stabilize. The enemy is coming. Therefore, if they manage to capture and build a defense, they can go completely into the wilderness. And due to the topographic component, and due to the fact that there will be no counterattack in the near future, respectively, transfer forces and experienced brigades to other directions.